Drogon flew over the dark waves with something in his heart no one had seen in a beast before: grief. His mother, the only soul who'd ever touched him with love, lay cold and still between his massive claws. Her silver hair was soaked with blood, her skin pale like ash. He didn't understand death the way humans did. He just knew she wasn't waking up, and that Jon Snow had been the last one to hold her. But dragons were not only fire and bone, they remembered. Somewhere in the blood of the old magic, Drogon remembered whispers passed down through fire, songs of the Red Priests and the temple beyond the narrow sea. He turned from Westeros, his wings beating heavy with sorrow, and flew towards Volantis. The sky turned red as he crossed the sea. People looked up from the streets of Essos' great cities, murmuring in fear. A black dragon hadn't been seen for centuries, especially not one carrying a dead Targaryen queen. When Drogon landed near the temple of R'hllor in Volantis, his roar cracked windows and turned priests to their knees. Kinvara, high priestess of the Lord of Light, emerged from the flames of her chamber. Her eyes gleamed as she saw Daenerys' broken body. "So, it begins," she whispered, stepping barefoot. Toward the fallen queen. The Red Temple closed its gates to the world. Weeks passed, rumors spread. Some said the dragon burned the temple down. Others claimed fire rose from its roof every night like a volcano. Then one night, silence. No flame, no dragon, nothing. Until a scream pierced the dark. It wasn't human. Daenerys Targaryen awoke in fire. At first she thought she was dreaming, caught between death and life. Her skin burned, yet she didn't feel pain. Her heart pounded like a war drum, and then she gasped. Her first breath was full of smoke. Her chest ached, but she was alive. Alive in a room of glowing embers and chanting priests who stepped back in awe as her eyes opened. "Where am I?" Her voice cracked, raspy and dry. Kinvara stepped forward. "You are in the Lord's fire, Stormborn. He returned you. He has plans for you." Daenerys blinked. "Jon, he—" Her voice broke again, but not from weakness, from rage. Her memory returned like blades stabbing her mind. Jon's hands, his words, his betrayal, the cold kiss of death. She screamed. The sound echoed across the temple like thunder. "Good," Kinvara said calmly. "Let that fire grow, Your Grace. Westeros has not seen your true wrath." Drogon lay nearby, resting beside her like a shadow. When she saw him, she fell against him, her hands pressed to his scales. He let out a low, rumbling purr. Even in death, she had been his queen. Daenerys Targaryen, the breaker of chains, had risen again, but she would no longer be a breaker, not a liberator, not a symbol. She would be a reckoning. The flames outside the temple flickered lower as Daenerys stood, tall for the first time since her rebirth. Her skin bore faint scars, faded reminders of death, but her heart throbbed with something new. Purpose without mercy. Kinvara draped her in crimson robes threaded with gold, the color of fire and faith. She had died a queen betrayed by love, but now she was something more. Something divine, they said. The Red Priests had begun their whispers already. Across Volantis, slaves, merchants, and nobles alike repeated the name Daenerys Stormborn with reverence. Word spread fast through the free cities. The Dragon Queen lives, returned by fire, chosen by the Lord of Light. And behind the words, fear bloomed like wildfire. But Daenerys did not stay in Volantis for long. She had no patience for worship. Without war. Her mind lingered on the throne that had melted under Drogon's rage. She remembered Jon's kiss, the knife, the cold betrayal that had stilled her heart. Her love had been her undoing. That would not happen again. Within a fortnight, she stood aboard a great ship surrounded by loyal Red Priests and sellswords, drawn to her cause by gold, flame, and legend. Behind her, Drogon flew overhead, his shadow washing over the waves like a curse. She set sail for Meereen first, not out of nostalgia, but necessity. The old city still held memories of her conquest and loyalists who never forgot her name. Upon arriving, she was met with stunned silence. Then slowly the people emerged, whispering her name. A girl brought her flowers. A man wept. And when Drogon landed atop the Great Pyramid once more, a city bowed. Tyrion had left Meereen in the hands of diplomats and dreamers, but they were gone now. The city had fallen into chaos after her death. The fighting pits reopened. The noble families she once humbled had crawled back to power. But when Daenerys marched through the streets with her flaming priests, heads bowed. The nobility remembered her justice and her wrath. She didn't speak of peace, not this time. Standing atop the Great Pyramid, with flames burning in the brazier beside her, she addressed the crowd. Her voice echoed across the city like prophecy. I came once with mercy. I freed you, gave you choice, and watched you choose your chains again. But now I return not as your queen, but as your fire. No more chains, no more mercy. The world will burn clean, and only the worthy shall rise from the ashes. They cheered because they feared. Within days, she had full command of Meereen. Her Gen, the unsullied, scattered and leaderless after Grey Worm returned to Nath, were called back under her banner. Many came, some out of loyalty, others from desperation. The flame called to them all. In the red temple of Meereen, she stared into the fire alongside Kinvara. Visions flickered in the smoke, dragons circling the sky, armies drowning in flame, a red throne rising over ash. And at the center of it all, a face she could never forget. Jon Snow. You still love him? Kinvara said quietly, her eyes watching the fire. Daenerys' jaw tightened. I loved who I thought he was. He made his choice. Now I will make mine. You were brought back for vengeance, Your Grace, but also for truth. There is one more lie left to burn. Daenerys turned away from the fire, her voice a whisper of fury. Then we begin with Winterfell. She would not march quietly this time. The Dragon Queen was done asking the world to be better. Now the world would kneel, or it would burn. The Raven arrived at Winterfell in the dead of night, wings slick. With rain, feathers heavy with an omen none could ignore. Sansa Stark read the message once, then again, her face pale beneath the flickering candlelight. She handed it silently to Bran, who read it without a word. Only his ever-knowing gaze shifted, the corners of his mouth tightening just slightly. She lives, Sansa whispered, her voice full of something between disbelief and dread. And she's coming. The silence in the great hall was suffocating. Arya stood by the hearth, her fingers resting on the hilt of a blade that had seen too much blood. Jon needs to hear this. But Jon Snow, no, Aegon Targaryen, wasn't in Winterfell. After handing the throne to Bran and vanishing into the north, he had lived in obscurity beyond the wall, away from politics, away from pain. He hadn't expected to be dragged back into fire. When the messenger found him in a camp near the haunted forest, Jon didn't speak for a long time after hearing the news. He stared out into the snow like a man watching ghosts dance in the wind. Tormund stood nearby, solemn and grim. Even Ghost whined low, sensing something had changed. She's alive, Jon finally said, more to himself than to anyone else. I felt her die. You killed her, Tormund corrected. Didn't think the dead got second chances. Jon looked up, eyes haunted. Neither did I. Still he rode, south through frost and forest, through villages who still remembered the Queen of Ash. Whispers followed him like shadows. The Dragon Queen lives. She brings fire with her. She remembers. And deep inside, so did he. Back in Meereen, Daenerys moved like a storm. Her armies grew with every passing week. The Red Priests called her the Flame Reborn. Slaves rose in cities that had long forgotten her name. Mercenaries pledged swords, not just for coin, but for prophecy. And still Drogon circled overhead, his wings darkening the skies, his roar an ancient promise of vengeance. She had waited long enough. The ships were ready. Her army was no longer a scattered remnant. They were zealots, freedmen, soldiers, and those drawn to something primal, retribution. She stood on the deck of the lead ship, her silver hair whipping in the wind, her eyes locked on the western horizon. I spared the north once, she said to Kinvara beside her, but mercy made me weak. This time they will kneel. And Jon Snow? Kinvara asked, her voice carefully neutral. Daenerys didn't answer at first. Then, softly, "He'll understand when it's over. He'll see I was right all along." The voyage was uneventful, as if the sea itself feared to challenge her. When her ships landed near White Harbor, the northern banners flew high, but they were not met with steel. Instead, emissaries came with cloaked faces and trembling hands. Sansa Stark did not come herself. She sent a message. "If you burn the north, you'll prove everything we feared. Come alone. Meet me at the Weirwood Grove near Winterfell. Talk, or burn us all." Daenerys held the parchment with a look that flickered between curiosity and contempt. She crumpled it in her fist, firelight dancing in her pupils. "Fine," she said, voice like steel. "Let the wolf come to the flame." But the north was not idle. While Daenerys prepared her arrival, Sansa had sent word to every house still loyal to her name. They had not forgotten the smoke rising from King's Landing, the innocent turned to ash, nor had they forgotten the man who had slain their last. Hope for peace, and vanished into exile. And far beyond the frost, Jon rode hard for Winterfell, haunted by visions of silver hair and burning skies. The north was ready for war, but none of them truly understood what had risen across the sea. This was no queen, this was fire given form. The wind howled through the godswood of Winterfell as Sansa stood beneath the ancient weirwood tree, its red leaves trembling like they knew what was coming. She wore no crown today, only furs and leather, northern and proud. Snow fell softly, blanketing the ground around her, but the cold did little to settle the storm inside her chest. She had grown since the last time she faced Daenerys Targaryen. The woman who stood here now was not the frightened girl of King's Landing, nor the cautious lady of Winterfell. She was a Stark, bone deep, and this was her ground. She heard the dragon before she saw it. A screech like death split the air, and snow whipped into a frenzy as Drogon landed just beyond the grove. Trees cracked from the force of it. Smoke hissed from his nostrils as his molten eyes scanned the trees, restless and wild. Then Daenerys stepped down from his back. She didn't wear armor. She didn't need to. Her presence was armor enough. The red and black of her cloak shimmered like flame against the snow, and her eyes found Sansa immediately, burning with something not quite human anymore. "Sansa Stark," Daenerys said softly. "I expected more guards." Sansa didn't flinch. "I expected less fire." They stood in silence, the cold air thick with everything unsaid. Then Daenerys took a step closer, the snow hissing under her boots. "You sent a message for peace," she said, voice calm. "But I know a trap when I see one." "It's not a trap," Sansa said flatly. "It's a warning." Daenerys tilted her head, amused. "And what exactly are you warning me about?" Sansa's voice dropped to a near whisper. "The North remembers." A flicker of pain flashed across Daenerys' face, quickly masked. "The North remembers lies. It remembers propaganda told by men afraid of a woman who didn't kneel." "You burned a city full of children," Sansa said sharply. "And you think we feared your gender? No, we feared your rage, your madness." The word hung between them like poison. Madness. Daenerys' lips twitched. "Careful," she said, stepping even closer. "You forget what I am." "I haven't," Sansa replied. "You're a dragon. But even dragons can be slain." For a moment, Daenerys looked ready to order Drogon to burn the godswood to cinders. But instead she smiled, something cold and hollow. "You think Jon can save you," she said, voice low. "You think if you stall me long enough, he'll come riding in like the good little hero." Sansa didn't reply, but Daenerys saw, it in her eyes, the hope. "I loved him," Daenerys whispered. "I would have given him everything, and he stabbed me through the heart because I scared him. You scared all of us. Then be afraid again." Daenerys turned her back without another word. Drogon lowered his wing, and she climbed atop him in one fluid motion. "We gave you a chance," Sansa called after her. "You could have ruled, but now you'll burn everything just to prove you were right." The dragon launched into the sky, sending a blizzard of snow and dirt into the air. Sansa watched her vanish into the clouds, heart hammering in her chest. It hadn't been a peace talk. It had been a declaration of war, And this time, the North wouldn't wait behind its walls. They would fight, and they would bleed. But if the Dragon Queen thought they would bow, then she had truly forgotten what the North was made of. The wind carried snow and silence across the hills outside Winterfell, but beneath that quiet, armies stirred. Jon Snow stood at the edge of the camp, staring at the northern horizon, his face shadowed beneath a heavy hood. Ghost sat beside him, still and watchful. Behind him, the North had gathered, not in massive numbers, but in loyal hearts. Men from Carhold, Bear Island, Houseglover and Reed, women and boys who had seen too much war, but still raised spears and swords because they had no choice. The North remembered, and the North would not bend the knee. Tormund came up behind, him spitting into the snow. "She really crawled out of the fire, eh? You always find a way to piss off powerful women." Jon didn't smile. "She shouldn't be alive," Tormund shrugged. "Neither should you if we're keeping score." Jon turned slowly. "She's not the same. Whatever brought her back? It twisted something." Tormund nodded grimly. "She's coming for blood." That night the camp prepared for siege. Scouts reported Daenerys was moving fast, too fast. Her forces had taken the Dreadfort in a single day. Not with overwhelming force, but with fire. No survivors. The Boltons were cruel bastards, but their end sent a message. Sansa held a council in Winterfell's great hall. Jon arrived late, the chill still clinging to his cloak. When he walked in, all eyes turned. It was the first time in over a year that the Stark siblings stood in the same room. Sansa's face tightened. "You shouldn't have come." Jon looked at her, his voice tired. "She's my mistake, I'll fix it." Arya leaned forward from the shadows, her tone colder than the snow. "If she gets past us, she'll burn the whole realm. She's not here to rule, she's here to punish." Bran said nothing. His blank eyes stared at the fire like he was watching another time, another place. "She spared me," Sansa finally said. "That means she wants something." "She wants everything," Jon said. "She thinks death made her a god." A silence fell. Sansa looked into the flames. "Then we kill a god." Jon nodded, but inside something tore at him. The Daenerys he had known, the woman who freed slaves, who fought the undead, who wept for lost children, was dead. Whatever rose in her place wore her face, but not her heart. Still, part of him hoped he was wrong. Hope died 3 days later. Drogon appeared in the sky like a black comet, flames trailing in his wake. Winterfell's bells rang out, but it was already too late. He didn't attack the walls. He attacked the roads, the escape routes, the supply lines. He turned the fields to ash. His fire didn't discriminate between soldiers and soil. Then her army came, not just unsullied, but thousands more. Sellswords with red banners, zealots from the Red Temple, and freedmen twisted by devotion, not to a queen, but a resurrected flame. Jon and Tormund led a defense outside the gates, while Arya moved through. The trees like a ghost. She had her own target, Daenerys herself. She remembered the list, the names of those who deserved death. And now the silver-haired queen had risen to the top of it again. Inside the city, Sansa watched from the ramparts as the dragons circled above. Her hand gripped the stone wall tightly. "She won't stop," she whispered. "She's not here to win, she's here to cleanse." Bran sat in his chair unmoved. This was always going to happen. Sansa turned, bitter. "You saw this." "I saw all the paths," he said softly. "This is one of the darkest, but the fire can still be put out." "How?" Bran looked out at the blazing fields. "Someone has to kill her." Jon stood in the mud, sword drawn, watching the flames devour the north. His eyes burned with more than smoke. He had given her his love. He had given her his trust. Then he had taken her life. And now she had come to take everything back, with fire and blood. Night fell like a shroud over Winterfell, thick with smoke and dread. Fires burned beyond the walls, casting a sick orange glow on the snow-covered stones. The screams had faded, but the silence left in their place was worse. Arya moved like death through the ruined woods outside the castle. She wore black, her blade hidden beneath her cloak, her face pale as moonlight. She had watched Drogon torch the southern road, seen men and horses burn alive. The flames had moved like they had minds of their own, as if they hunted. Not war, not conquest, punishment. Her orders were clear. Find Daenerys, end the war before Winterfell became another King's Landing. But Arya knew it wouldn't be. Easy, dragons didn't sleep, and neither did fanatics. She watched from the trees as a group of red priests marched through the snow, chanting in High Valyrian, their eyes wild, hands glowing faintly from embered symbols etched into their skin. Behind them walked unsullied in crimson cloaks, their discipline now twisted into fanaticism. These weren't the same soldiers who once freed slaves. These were enforcers of a new doctrine, bow or burn. Arya slipped past them, unseen. Inside, Winterfell. Jon stood in the courtyard, sword drawn, breath white in the cold. He'd just returned from the outer trenches. The dead lay in rows now. Northern sons, stark men. They'd held the first assault, but barely. He hadn't seen her, yet, not face to face, not since that day in the throne room. Tormund limped beside him, bleeding from the thigh, but still grinning like a madman. We killed 20 of her fire priests before they even touched the gates. Jon didn't smile. And she's still out there. Aye, somewhere in the sky or behind a veil of smoke, hiding behind that beast like a coward. She's not hiding, Jon muttered. She's waiting. And then they heard it. A roar that cracked the sky. Deep, ancient, and angry. Drogon. Jon turned toward, the sound just as fire lit the tree line. Trees exploded into flame, and a wave of soldiers, Daenerys' soldiers, charged from the smoke. The second assault had begun. Sansa stood at the battlements, directing archers. Her face was white with ash, but her voice held. She would not abandon Winterfell, not again. She had spent too long losing homes, losing family. If this was the last stand of the Starks, so be it. Below, the clash was brutal. Northern steel met foreign blades, and the snow turned red. Drogon didn't attack the castle directly. He circled, strafed, scared. He was drawing out someone. Jon realized it too late. He wasn't burning the castle. He was hunting Jon. In the heart of the fire, Daenerys watched from atop Drogon. Her hair whipped behind her, and her eyes glowed gold from the reflection of the inferno. She felt no remorse as her forces broke through the outer walls. This was justice. This was cleansing. They had killed her. Now they would learn what it meant to take fire for granted. But she wasn't prepared for the girl in the trees. Arya moved like shadow and silence. She had reached the command tent, outside the east gate. She knew Daenerys would come down eventually. Pride would bring her close. Arya waited, patient as the gods themselves, and then she saw her. Daenerys landed in the clearing with a blast of wind and fire, Drogon roaring behind her. She stepped forward alone, eyes scanning the battlefield, as if she could sense where Jon was. Arya drew her blade, but before she could strike, Drogon turned. He smelled her. Arya froze as his glowing eyes locked on her, his mouth slowly opening with smoke coiling out. The strike was seconds away, and then a horn sounded from the west gate. Jon had come through the fire. He walked across the courtyard, unflinching, longclaw in hand, black cloak flaring behind him. His eyes found hers. Daenerys stepped forward, descending from Drogon with the slow grace of a goddess. He stopped only feet away. "You're alive," he said, voice hollow. "I was chosen," she said softly, "to finish what I started. This isn't justice." "It is, Jon," she whispered, stepping closer. "This time, no more mercy, no more weakness. You should stand with me." He looked at her, really looked at her. The girl who once reached out to save the world. Now, a woman wrapped in fire and revenge. "No," he said. And then, before either could strike, Arya moved, a blur of death, of vengeance, of northern justice. But Drogon saw her first. The scream that followed would shake the gods would. The scream tore through the trees like the end of the world. Drogon's roar was a tidal wave of sound and rage, shaking the very stones of Winterfell. Arya had leapt from the shadows, blade poised, inches from Daenerys' back, but the dragon had seen her, felt her, moved for her. The fire came too fast. Jon screamed her name, but it was drowned in the roar. Arya flipped, landed hard, and rolled, but not fast enough. The flames grazed her side, catching her cloak. She screamed as fire licked her, shoulder melting fabric into skin. She dropped to the ground, twisting, clawing, smothering the fire in snow. Daenerys had turned just in time to see it. Her face didn't change. She didn't flinch, not at Arya's agony, not at the sight of a Stark burning. "You sent an assassin," she said coldly, her voice echoing over the snow. "Just like the rest, just like the men who killed me." "She's my sister," Jon shouted, rushing to Arya's side. He dropped to his knees, pulling her back from the scorched ground. Her face was twisted with pain, but she was alive. Barely. Daenerys stepped closer, and Drogon crept behind her, eyes locked on Jon like a predator remembering old wounds. "I gave you everything," she said. Her voice cracked, not from sorrow, but rage buried under a mountain of betrayal. "I trusted you, I loved you." Jon looked up at her, holding Arya in one arm, Longclaw in the other. "You burned children in the street." "And they were loyal to a broken world," she snapped. "A world that murdered vision, that feared change. You could have ruled beside me, but you were too weak." "I was strong enough to stop you," Jon said. She stared at him, eyes wide, blinking once like she remembered the blade sliding into her chest. Then she nodded slowly. "Then let's finish it." She raised her hand. Drogon inhaled. Jon didn't think. He moved. He rolled, grabbing Arya, diving behind a broken wall just as fire surged forward. The blast shattered stone, melted snow, turned wood to ash. The side of the courtyard vanished in an instant. Winterfell was burning. Flames climbed its towers, crackled across the battlements, devoured its banners and memories. Stark men fled through the gates. Sansa watched from above, horror frozen on her face. The home she had fought for, bled for, was turning to cinders before her eyes, but she didn't cry. She ran. Jon stood, face blackened with soot, blood dripping from his temple. Arya lay behind the wall, conscious but badly hurt. His hand gripped Longclaw until his knuckles went white. Daenerys watched from across the fire. Her expression was calm now, certain. "You'll never stop me," she said softly. "You're just one man." "I don't need to stop you," Jon said. "I just need to end it." He charged. Their swords clashed like thunder. Daenerys wasn't just a queen now. She was something else. Fire coursed through her veins, strength unnatural and merciless. She met his blade again and again, each strike sending sparks flying. Jon fought with everything he had, not for honor, not even for vengeance. He fought for the North, for Arya, for the man he once was. The battle was brutal. Snow and ash fell together like a storm. Drogon roared in circles, unable to strike without risking Daenerys. And then it happened. Jon fainted low, then drove Longclaw forward, aiming for her heart. Daenerys turned too late, but instead of piercing flesh, a burst of flame erupted from her body, sending Jon flying back, sword skidding across the courtyard. She stood, panting, glowing, her veins lit with flickering embers. "I can't be killed by mortal men," she said, voice distorted, inhuman. "I was reborn in flame. I am fire." Jon looked up, breath ragged, his body broken. "Then it won't be a man who kills you," a voice answered from behind her. "I never was." Arya. She stood, burnt, bloodied, but alive, and in her hand was a blade of dragonglass, black as night, stolen from the crypts. She plunged it into Daenerys's back, straight into her spine. Daenerys gasped once, then her knees buckled and the fire went out. Daenerys fell forward like a collapsing tower, the light in her eyes dimming as the dragonglass blade pierced her heart. No words, no final cry, just silence, thick and sudden, as if the world itself held its breath. Arya collapsed beside her, gasping from pain, her burned arm trembling. Jon rushed to her, catching her before she hit the ground. Her face was slick with ash and blood, but her eyes were sharp. "She wasn't going to stop," Arya whispered. Jon nodded slowly. "I know." Behind them, Drogon howled, a scream so raw, so ancient, it didn't sound like any beast. It was mourning. It was rage. He surged forward, crashing down beside Daenerys's body. For a moment, Jon stood frozen, expecting fire, death. But Drogon didn't attack. He nudged her lifeless body with his massive snout over and over. When she didn't move, he let out another cry, longer, deeper, a sound that cracked stone and hearts alike. Then something changed. Drogon turned his head to Jon, not with blind hatred, but with understanding, recognition. He saw Jon not just as the man who had once betrayed his queen, but the one who had loved her, mourned her, carried her fire long after it had gone cold. And then he lifted Daenerys gently in one claw. He looked to the skies and flew. Upward, past the ruined towers of Winterfell, into the ash-dark clouds above. He vanished into the storm, carrying her. Away again, just like before. Only this time she would not return. The fire had ended. Days passed. The snow kept falling, covering the scorched earth. Winterfell had been scarred, but it stood. The fire hadn't reached the crypts or the godswood, though smoke still curled from broken walls. Sansa walked through the ruins with slow, measured steps. She stopped at the courtyard where it had ended. The blood had been cleaned, the bodies buried. But something lingered in the air, a ghost of fire, a whisper of vengeance. Arya rested in her chambers, bandaged, silent. She didn't speak much now. Her eyes had changed again, older, distant. She had saved the North. She had killed a queen. But her scars would never leave. Jon stood outside the gates, looking toward the east. He hadn't spoken at Daenerys's funeral. There hadn't been one. Just a brief memory spoken to the snow. He didn't ask forgiveness, didn't want it. What he had done would never leave him. Just like the first time, he had loved her, and he had lost her. Twice. Bran summoned them all once the smoke cleared. In the great hall, he sat on a simple wooden throne, his crown plain, his voice steady. Daenerys Stormborn of House Targaryen is gone. The war she brought with her is over. No one cheered. There will be no vengeance, no songs, only peace if we can hold it. The realm, fractured and scarred, began to rebuild, slowly. The North remained independent, Sansa its queen. Arya disappeared again weeks later, some said to the far west, others said she simply vanished into the snow. Jon left the same day. He didn't say goodbye. He rode north with Ghost and a few men. From the Night's Watch, though there were no more White Walkers, no more walls to defend. Some say he wanted silence. Others believe he was waiting for the cold to take him. No one saw Drogon again. But sometimes on the quietest nights, people swear they see fire moving across the sky. A shadow with wings, flying east. Always east, and in the far lands where the sun rises, where the red temples glow and ancient magic stirs, the people whisper of a queen buried in ash and fire, and the dragon who guards her, waiting for the world to burn again.